Thanks for coming here today to hear us read stories from Stephen Leacock's Canadian classic Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. We are all librarians from Burnaby Public Library who volunteered to come do this to help out the Camping Bureau, and because we love the stories and we love to get to read to adults. Many of us read to children as well. So for those who may not know Stephen Leacock, he was the grandfather of a very particularly Canadian form of humor, poking fun at ourselves and our eccentric neighbors, which we like to do, especially when our neighbors or ourselves are getting a bit too big for our boots. They named the Literary Award for Humor after him, and Stuart McLean has won it twice. His Vinyl Cafe record store's motto could be the motto for all of Canada. We may not be big, but we're small. For a big country, we still have a small number of people. Our cities may not be as big or famous as New York or London, and we may not be as important as we'd like to think we are, but we are small enough to know each other. I live and work in the Burnaby Heights neighborhood, and it is like a small town. You go to the bakery or the bank or the drugstore, and they greet you by name. And you sit down at the sidewalk cafe, and half a dozen of your friends walk by and say hello. It's amazing. How do you get to Burnaby? My mother-in-law's friend says, turn right on Hastings and go back 50 years. Turn right on Kensington, go back another 51 years, and we come here to Burnaby Village, or should I say Mariposa, in June 1912. The beautiful carousel is just being built. Burnaby looks sort of like this. Our city archivist, Arilee Sill, and I selected these pictures to illustrate things that happen in these stories, but they're all pictures of Burnaby in around 1912. And Stephen Leacock is just publishing Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town. He was born in 1869 in England, but he grew up on the shores of Lake Simcoe in Ontario, and by 1912 he was a very popular professor of economics at McGill University, and he had published a successful textbook on political science. He was a natural ham, and his theatrical lecturing style and his rambling sense of humor and his really shabby appearance made him a great favorite with the students. A friend of him described him as disheveled, like a bear that has been taught to dress itself but had never got it right. He bought a summer house on Lake Simcoe near Orillia, Ontario. He loved to go fishing, but when his sailboat would get becalmed, he would just run his shirt up like a flag and wave it until someone came to rescue him. Eventually, his handyman painted the front of his boat red so they could find it on the water more easily. First, he published his stories in magazines, and when he decided to make them into a book, he sent them to his textbook publisher, the economics textbook publisher, who sent them back. So then he published them himself, and soon the Montreal Gazette newspaper commissioned him to write a new set of stories with the stipulation that they be typically Canadian. These were the Sunshine Sketches of a Little Town, which ran in the Gazette every other Saturday from February to June 1912. In the centuries before radio, reading aloud was a popular form of entertainment for adults as well as kids. If you're in the Love Farmhouse over there on the other side of the museum, you'll see mannequins dressed up. You know, they're all doing something with their hands, and they're all in the living room listening to the radio. Now take away the radio and add in your favorite uncle, who just brought in the Gazette, today's Gazette, which you've been waiting for 2 weeks. And here's the latest Stephen Leacock story, and he reads it out loud to everyone in his thrilling, deep voice. And no matter how much everyone laughs, he always keeps a poker face, but you can watch his eyebrows go up at the jokes. In April 1912, the Titanic sank. So we have to imagine the listener's feelings just a month or two later as the disaster unfolds in the story of the marine excursion of the Knights of Pythias, which we will hear this afternoon. Leacock's stories become even funnier when read aloud. Like Mark Twain and Charles Dickens, whom he much admired, Leacock was a tremendously popular public speaker all over North America. One audience member laughed so hard he passed out and had to be rushed away. The man recovered, much to Leacock's chagrin. "My fortune would have been made," he remarked wistfully. "Think of the headlines. Man dies laughing at Leacock." He drew his cast of eccentric small-town characters from tales he heard in the barber shop and folks he knew in Orillia, using their real names at first, which caused some consternation when the Gazette came out. When the book was published later, the names were thinly disguised, and in his preface, Leacock backpedals a bit. "I must disclaim at once all intentions of trying to do anything so ridiculously easy as writing about a real place and real people. Mariposa is not a real town. On the contrary, it is about 70 or 80 of them. You may find them all the way from Lake Superior to the sea." Each of his stories is a perfect character sketch, drawn in elaborate turn-of-the-century language with affectionate irony and plays on words. Written in the years just before Prohibition, as the temperance movement was gaining ground, a good deal of the humor involves alcohol. The characters take great pride in their little town, even if they can't quite follow cosmopolitan words like grill room and Rathskeller, calling them girl room and rat's cooler. If we read all of the Sunshine Sketches, which is a long book, we would be here all night. So we picked our two favorites, The Hostelry of Mr. Smith and The Marine Excursion of the Knights of Pythias. And now, without further ado, we will start The Hostelry of Mr. Smith.